What if everything changed in just 8 days? No warning, no official announcement, just a quiet shift that somehow reshaped everything inside Turning Point USA. At first, no one noticed. That's what makes this so wild, because while everyone was watching the surface, something else was happening behind it. But then something changed. Small details started lining up, positions shifting, voices going silent, new ones are appearing. And this is where it gets strange, because when you map those 8 days out, it doesn't look random at all. It looks like a plan. So the real question is, who was moving the pieces? And why did it happen so fast? Now, before we go deeper, you guys made it crystal clear in our latest poll, the TPUSA fallout is the topic you want to see covered next. So, today, we're diving deep into exactly what's happening behind the scenes. Let's get into it. To understand how this even happened, you have to look at how stable everything seemed before those 8 days. Because from the outside, Turning Point USA looked locked in. Clear leadership, clear messaging, clear direction. Nothing about it suggested sudden change. But then, something shifted. Not publicly, quietly, small things at first. A delayed appearance here. A missing statement there. Moments that didn't seem important on their own, but started to feel connected when you looked closer. And this is where it gets strange. No official announcement marked the beginning. No headline said something is happening. Instead, it started with absence. People who were usually visible weren't. Decisions that were usually immediate slowed down. And that kind of silence? It's not random. But here's the problem. Most people didn't notice. Because nothing dramatic had happened yet. No conflict, no public fallout. Just subtle shifts that only made sense in hindsight. And that's what made it so effective. Because while everything looked normal on the surface, something was moving underneath. And it doesn't stop there. As those days went on, new voices began appearing. Not loudly, not as replacements, but as additions. Gradual. Almost seamless. And that's when the pattern started forming. Because now, it wasn't just about what was missing. It was about what was being added. And once you see both at the same time, you realize something bigger is happening. But at that moment, no one had the full picture. Just fragments. Moments that didn't quite add up. And a growing sense that something was shifting without anyone saying it out loud. And that's where the story really begins. Day one didn't look like anything. No announcement, no visible shakeup, just another normal cycle inside Turning Point USA. But then something changed. A scheduled appearance didn't happen. No explanation. No follow-up. Just silence. At the time, it felt small, easily ignored. But that moment, it mattered more than anyone realized. Because that's where the pattern began. And this is where it gets strange. Day 2 brought something even more subtle. A statement that usually would have come out quickly didn't. Delayed. Then shortened. And when it finally appeared, it felt different. Less detailed. More controlled. But here's the problem. No one questioned it. Because on its own, it didn't seem important. But when you place it next to day 1, it starts to look intentional. And it doesn't stop there. By day 3, something else happened. A new voice appeared. Not in a major role. Not as a replacement. Just present. Speaking where others usually would. And that shift? It was easy to miss. But it marked something important. Because now, it wasn't just about absence. It was about substitution. And that's when things started falling apart. Because by day 4, the pattern became clearer. People who were normally at the center of communication were stepping back. Not all at once, not dramatically, but consistently. And in their place, others were stepping forward. But then, something changed again. The messaging itself started to shift. Not in content, but in tone. More cautious, more measured, less spontaneous. And that difference? It stood out to those paying attention. Because tone doesn't change without reason. And this is where the tension really started building. Because now, the question wasn't, what's happening? It was, why is everything being adjusted so carefully? But here's where it gets even more interesting. No one inside the organization addressed it. No clarification. No explanation. Just continuation. As if nothing had changed at all. And that's what made it powerful. Because when change happens without acknowledgement, it feels invisible. But it isn't. It's just harder to see. And by day 5, the shift was undeniable. Not publicly, but structurally, meetings changed. Roles adjusted, not announced. Just different. And that's when people inside started noticing. Quietly. Because now, it wasn't just external observers seeing patterns. It was internal. And that's when everything escalated. Because once people on the inside start feeling a shift, it's not speculation anymore. It's real. But here's the twist. Even then, nothing was confirmed. No official change in leadership. No statement of transition. Just movement. Consistent. Controlled. And building. And that's what made those first 5 days so critical. Because they set the stage. Quietly. Without resistance. Without attention. For something much bigger. And just when it seemed like the changes might stay subtle, day 6 hit. And that's when everything started accelerating. Day 6 didn't start quietly. It started with momentum. Because by that point, the small shifts weren't isolated anymore, they were connected. And once you saw the connection, you couldn't ignore it. But then something changed. Decisions started happening faster. Not publicly, internally. Moves that would normally take time were happening almost instantly. And that speed? That's what stood out. Because organizations like Turning Point USA don't usually move that fast without reason. And this is where it gets strange. The changes weren't chaotic. They were precise, targeted, almost like someone already knew exactly what needed to happen and in what order. But here's the problem. There was still no announcement, no confirmation, nothing to explain why everything was suddenly accelerating. And that silence? It made everything feel even more controlled. And it doesn't stop there. By the middle of day 6, communication channels started shifting. Who was speaking? Who was approving? Who was visible? All of it began to change. Not dramatically, but noticeably. And that's when things started falling apart even faster. Because now, it wasn't just about roles. It was about authority. Who was making decisions? And more importantly, who wasn't anymore? But then something changed again. Day 7 began with something subtle but significant. A key figure didn't appear where they normally would have. No explanation. No mention. Just absence. And in their place, someone else stepped in. Confident. Prepared. As if it had been planned. And that moment, it didn't feel like a temporary adjustment. It felt like a shift. But here's where the tension really escalated. The messaging stayed consistent. No signs of disruption. No indication that anything unusual was happening, which made the changes even more powerful. Because now, the transition wasn't visible. It was seamless. And that's rare. Because most leadership shifts create noise, confusion, pushback. But this had none of that. And that's what made it different. Because it suggested something else entirely. Preparation. But the biggest twist? Still no official acknowledgement. No one stepping forward to say what was happening. Just continuation. As if the new structure had always been there. And that's what made day 7 so critical. Because by the end of it, the pieces were already in place. The roles had shifted. The voices had changed. The structure had adjusted. All without anyone outside fully realizing it. And that's when everything reached its breaking point. Because day 8 wasn't about subtle change anymore. It was about completion. And once that day arrived, there was no going back. Day 8 didn't begin with an announcement. It began with a feeling. Something was different. Not obvious. Not dramatic. But undeniable. Because by that point, the changes that started quietly were now complete. And this is where it gets strange. Nothing looked out of place. No headlines. no statements. Everything appeared normal. But if you had been watching closely, you knew it wasn't. Because the structure had shifted, fully. But here's the problem. It happened so smoothly that most people didn't realize it had already finished. There was no moment. No clear line between before and after. Just a seamless transition from one state to another. And it doesn't stop there. The people who had stepped forward in the previous days, they were now fully in position. Not temporarily. Not filling in. Leading. And the people who had stepped back, they stayed back. No reappearance. No correction. Just absence. And that absence, it confirmed everything. Because now, it wasn't a pattern anymore. It was a result. And that's when things started falling apart. Because once people realized what had happened, they started asking how it happened so quietly. How something this significant could unfold without resistance, without disruption, without even being noticed. And that question, it changed everything. But then something changed again. People began looking at the 8 days as a whole, not individually, but as a sequence. And when you map it out, it doesn't look random. It looks structured. Day 1 removal, Day 2 adjustment, Day 3 introduction, Day 4 realignment, Day 5 internal awareness, Day 6 acceleration, Day 7 replacement, Day 8 completion. And suddenly, it all makes sense. But here's where the tension really peaks. Because that kind of sequence doesn't happen by accident. It requires coordination, timing, control. And that raises a bigger question. Who was guiding it? Because transitions like this don't just happen. They're executed. And that realization, it spread fast. Because now, the story wasn't just about a leadership shift. It was about how it was done. Quietly, precisely, without resistance. And that's what made it so powerful. Because by the time people noticed, it was already over. The structure had changed. The roles had shifted. And the organization was already operating in its new form. But the biggest twist? Still no explanation. No official breakdown. No confirmation of what had actually taken place. Just a new reality. One that looked like it had always been there. And that's what made it so difficult to process. Because when change happens without acknowledgement, it feels invisible, even when it's complete. And just when it seemed like the story had reached its conclusion, it didn't. Because now, people weren't just asking what happened. They were asking why. And that's when everything escalated. And that's when everything went from something feels off to this was deliberate. Because once people started asking why, the answers didn't come, but the patterns did. And this is where it gets strange. The more people looked back at those 8 days, the more they realized something wasn't just happening internally. It was being managed externally too. Because during that same window, the public-facing side of Turning Point USA didn't slow down. It didn't break. It didn't even stutter. Content kept flowing. Messaging stayed consistent. Events continued like nothing had changed. And that's what made it unsettling. Because behind the scenes, everything was shifting. But on the surface, nothing was. But here's the problem. That kind of stability during change isn't accidental. It's controlled. And that realization, it changed how people saw everything. Because now, the shift wasn't just about leadership. It was about execution. How do you move that many pieces without anyone noticing? And it doesn't stop there. People started asking who benefited, not publicly, quietly. Because when something this precise happens, there's always a direction, a purpose. But no one could point to a clear answer. Because no one stepped forward. No one claimed the change. And that absence? It made everything feel even more intentional. But then, something changed again. Small inconsistencies started appearing. Not in the shift itself, but in how it was being discussed. Different people describing it differently. Some calling it natural. Others hinting it was more structured. And that contradiction? It added tension. Because now, even the explanation felt unstable. And that's when things started falling apart even faster. Because now, people weren't just looking at what happened, they were looking at how it was being framed. And those two things didn't fully align. But here's where it really escalated. Internal voices, subtle ones, started surfacing. Not direct, not official, but enough to suggest that the shift wasn't as spontaneous as it appeared. Comments like, "Things had been building longer than people think," or "It didn't happen in 8 days. It just looked like it did." And those lines? They changed everything. Because now, the 8-day timeline didn't feel like the whole story. It felt like the final act. But if that's true, then what happened before it? And that question, it took over everything. Because now, people weren't just analyzing the 8 days. They were looking beyond them, trying to figure out what set the stage, what made it possible. And that's when the tension hit its peak. Because now, the story wasn't just about a leadership shift. It was about strategy, planning, execution, all happening quietly. And the biggest twist? Still no official explanation. No breakdown, no confirmation of how it all came together. Just a completed transition and a trail of questions. And that's what made it so powerful. Because when something happens this smoothly, it doesn't feel accidental. It feels designed. But then, the final piece surfaced. Not a document, not a statement. Something else. Something that didn't just explain what happened, it explained how it was possible. And once people saw it, everything changed. Big reveal. 400 words. And then, the piece that made everything finally make sense came into focus. Not a secret memo, not a hidden recording, a pattern hiding in plain sight. Because when people stopped looking at the 8 days as a sudden shift, and instead looked at the months leading up to it, everything changed. And this is where it gets strange. The 8-day power play wasn't really 8 days. It was the final stage of something that had already been building quietly, long before anyone noticed. But here's the problem. No one saw it because it didn't look like change. It looked like normal evolution. Small adjustments. New faces appearing gradually. Responsibilities being shared more broadly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would raise alarms. And that's exactly why it worked. Because by the time those 8 days arrived, the foundation was already set. And it doesn't stop there. When you map it out, the earlier changes line up perfectly with what happened later. People who stepped into visible roles during the 8 days had already been positioned months before. The voices that became central had already been integrated into the system, and the people who stepped back, they had been doing it gradually, long before anyone noticed. And that's the reveal. Not that everything changed in 8 days, but that the final 8 days were just the moment it became visible. Because the real shift had already happened, quietly, step by step. And once you see it that way, everything clicks. The smooth transition, the lack of resistance, the absence of disruption. It wasn't sudden, it was prepared. And if that's true, then the biggest twist isn't how fast it happened. It's how long it had been happening without anyone realizing it. When you step back and look at everything together, the quiet buildup, the 8-day shift, and the seamless transition, it stops being about a sudden change. It becomes about how change is designed. Because what this situation really shows isn't just about Turning Point USA, it's about strategy. Think about it. If you want to avoid resistance, you don't make one big move. You make a series of small ones. So small they don't trigger attention. So gradual they feel normal. And this is where it hits deeper. By the time people recognize the change, it's already complete. That's exactly what happened here. The 8 days weren't the start. They were the reveal. The moment when all the previous adjustments finally aligned. And that's what made it so effective. Because there was nothing left to disrupt, nothing left to challenge. Just a new structure already in place. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not how fast things can change, but how quietly they can change before anyone notices. And once that realization sets in, you start seeing similar patterns everywhere. So now it all comes down to one question. Did everything really change in 8 days? Or were we just seeing the final step of something that had been unfolding the whole time? Because if a shift this big can happen so quietly, what else is already changing around us without anyone noticing? Drop your thoughts below. Do you think this was a sudden move or a long-term plan finally coming into view? And if you want more deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe, because sometimes the biggest power moves aren't the loud ones. They're the ones you